Good morning, everybody. I don't know if you saw, but the CosmicSkeptic and a guy named David Benatar had a mock debate about antinatalism, which is a logical progression of the evil of veganism, or this belief that humans should not make any more humans because it's somehow immoral. David Benatar is the overt antinatalist here who uses what he calls an asymmetry between pain and pleasure to argue that it is better not to bring humans into existence. Before I examine this self-refuting, postmodern gobbledygook, let's talk meta-ethics, or something these incoherent moral relativist ideologues avoid like the plague in their quest to play God. Being a moral relativist and pushing normative moral behavior ideology is self-refuting, for starters. It's a non-starter. These atheist kooks believe morality is whatever anybody says it is, while at the same time pushing their subjective brand of morality as normative and universal. They refute themselves. Even though they claim morality is relative, they want you to accept their subjective and generally arbitrary idea of good and bad. I believe these atheists reject God because they want to be God. The CosmicSkeptic, who hasn't yet come out of his antinatalist closet because content, tries to talk meta-ethics with David Benatar, but Benatar has none of it. He understands that any meta-ethical discussion will quickly expose him as an incoherent fraud. He cannot talk about the nature of morality or how we know what's good or bad because ultimately he wants to ideologically define what is and isn't moral. But if he believes that this is just, he has to accept that your own understanding of what is good or bad, however arbitrary, is equally as valid. For example, he states that intrinsically bad suffering is all that matters, without giving any justification for this, even though there is pain that also leads to pleasure. But any claim he makes without justification, such as this one, can just as easily be rejected also without justification. Unless he can prove to you that you must accept his simplistic moral framework as objective and universal, you can reject it as arbitrary. But let's step into his "it is so because I say so" worldview and implode it. His asymmetry of pain and pleasure is illustrated by the following table that I copied from Wikipedia and edited just a bit. So on the left side you have scenario A, where a human exists, and on the right side you have scenario B, where no human exists. The first variant under scenario A is the presence of pain, which is bad. The second one is the presence of pleasure, which is good. The third variant under scenario B is absence of pain, which is good. And the fourth is the absence of pleasure, which is not bad. So if we further simplify reality and assign a value of -1 to bad and +1 to good, and consider not bad as 0 or somehow neutral, what we come up with is a moral calculus of 0 on the left-hand side and +1 on the right-hand side. And this is more or less how Benatar wants you to think of this asymmetry. So the human non-existing has morally a higher value, if you will, than the human that does exist. Obviously, the asymmetry here comes from variant number 4, or the absence of pleasure in a non-existing human being. Non-existing being. It reads, the absence of pleasure is not bad. But if you eliminate the double negative, you end up with the presence of pleasure is bad. While at the same time, variant number 2 under scenario A also states that presence of pleasure is good. So we got a problem here. Apparently a double standard, definitely a contradiction. No valid moral framework can state that pleasure is both good and bad at the same time. Now, You see why I call this postmodernist gobbledygook? But this is the sort of nonsense drivel that both veganism and antinatalism are grounded in. So where's the problem? It's simple. While it seems intuitively correct in scenario B to say that the absence of pleasure is not bad, the same can be said for the absence of pleasure is not good, right? Just as saying the absence of pleasure is not pink or the absence of pleasure is not bear. You don't actually think that the absence of pleasure is pink or bear, do you? Where does this absurdity come from? It comes from the fact that with the absence of a subject, everything about the subject is absent. The subject doesn't exist. And with the subject that doesn't exist, the absence of pleasure is not anything. Good, bad, pink, bear, doesn't matter. Frankly, how can you say that a subject or a person that doesn't exist is? How can you make any statement about the nature of a subject that doesn't exist? You can't. To say that a non-existent person is or is anything is absurd. It's a blatant contradiction. To even compare an existing human being to one that doesn't exist takes some serious mental gymnastics. But that is what both of these jokers are doing, except the joke is on you. While CosmicSkeptic was arguing that the person that doesn't exist is morally neutral in its existence because it experiences no pain, Benatar was arguing that non-existent person's existence is good because there is no pain. So while it seemed maybe like they were arguing about something important, they were bickering about nonsense while both assuming that a non-existent person is, which is ridiculous. How can a person that doesn't exist be anything? David Benatar's entire asymmetry is an absurd non-starter, period. Listen to CosmicSkeptic affirm this nonsense.
What I'm saying here is that if we consider the person who doesn't exist to be in a state of neutrality, as we did a moment ago,
if we consider, if you, CosmicSkeptic, consider the person who doesn't exist to be, well, that makes you an absolute buffoon, does it not? If you like the kind of work I do here, consider supporting me on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching. Have a good day.